a big press conference today with Pete Hegseth, Secretary of Defense, and General Dan Kane, who's chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff, to talk about how much damage did the American airstrikes do on the Iranian nuclear weapons program. Let's start with Secretary Hegseth, cut number 2.
Iran has recognized that their nuclear program was indeed severely damaged, but they also said that the U.S. strikes only strengthened their ability and their determination to complete their nuclear program. How do you respond to that, sir? Is that a provocation from Iran?
Well, I would say Iran's going to have to say a lot of things right now in order to bolster their image, especially internally. You know, in the media, there's a lot of things they'll say for domestic consumption. But we're watching very closely what they do. Again, that's the intel community. Our job as the chairman, the chairman laid it out so beautifully. Our job is to be prepared. And how proud are you? How proud am I? I didn't know the full story of those men and women 15 years ago who've been pointing at that target. That makes me proud to be an American. That's an awesome story. I hope we can tell more aspects of that in an unclassified way in the future. That's a great thing to know. Our job is to be prepared when the commander-in-chief calls based on those assessments. So, of course, our IC, the Intelligence Committee, will keep watching what Iran does and pay attention to that. But the president has created the contours, the opportunity for a deal, for peace, in something that the world said was intractable, that wasn't possible. And we got that peace, that ceasefire, that option, because of strength, because of his willingness to use American military might that no one else on the planet can do, with the kind of planners and operators that the chairman just laid out.
Now, what is he talking about? Chairman Kane gave a extensive debrief on the strikes today that began this way. Cut number 3.
Now let me next move to a walkthrough of the GBU-57 massive ordnance penetrator weapon and share a little bit about the planners who did this and their work on the weapon. First, let me set the stage for you. There's an organization in the U.S. called the Defense Threat Reduction Agency, DTRA. DTRA does a lot of things for our nation, but DTRA is the world's leading expert on deeply buried underground targets. In 2009, a Defense Threat Reduction Agency officer was brought into a vault at an undisclosed location and briefed on something going on in Iran. For security purposes, I'm not going to share his name. He was shown some photos and some highly classified intelligence of what looked like a major construction project in the mountains of Iran. He was tasked to study this facility, work with the intelligence community to understand it, and he was soon joined by an additional teammate. For more than 15 years, this officer and his teammate lived and breathed this single target, Fordow, a critical element of Iran's covert nuclear weapons program. He studied the geology. He watched the Iranians dig it out. He watched the construction, the weather, the discard material, the geology, the construction materials, where the materials came from. He looked at the vent shaft, the exhaust shaft, the electrical systems, the environmental control systems, every nook, every crater, every piece of equipment going in and every piece of equipment going out. They literally dreamed about this target at night when they slept. They thought about it driving back and forth to work, and they knew from the very first days what this was for. You do not build a multi-layered underground bunker complex with centrifuges and other equipment in a mountain for any peaceful purpose. They weren't able to discuss this with their family, their wives, their kids, their friends, but they just kept grinding it out. And along the way, they realized we did not have a weapon that could adequately strike and kill this target. So they began a journey to work with industry and other tacticians to develop the GBU-57. They tested it over and over again, tried different options, tried more after that. They accomplished hundreds of test shots and dropped many full-scale weapons against extremely realistic targets for a single purpose: kill this target at the time and place of our nation's choosing. And then, on a day in June of 2025, more than 15 years after they started their life's work, the phone rang and the President of the United States ordered the B-2 force that you've supported to go strike and kill this target. Yesterday, I had the incredible honor and privilege of spending time with these two Defense Threat Reduction Agency officers who've given so much. One of them said, quote, "I can't even get my head around this. My heart is so filled with the pride of being a part of this team. I am so honored to be a part of this." To you both, thank you, and thank you to your families. Operation Midnight Hammer was the culmination of those 15 years of incredible work. The air crews, the tanker crews, the weapons crews that built the weapons, the load crews that loaded it.
He kept going. Cut number 4. He's showing video, if you cannot see this, of the explosion in the cave, and it's extraordinary. I don't know if we have audio, but it shows the massive, it's just an amazing display that they cooked up on how it worked. And the penetrators go in so
Keep
deep.
it going for a minute. You'll see inside the
It's
the mission space.
Then it goes, that's the general saying, inside the mission space. You can see it come in, and then the second explosion.
Unlike a normal surface bomb, you won't see an impact crater because they're designed to deeply bury and then function. I know there's been a lot of questions about that. All 6 weapons at each vent at Fordo went exactly where they were intended to go. A bomb has 3 effects that causes damage: blast, fragmentation, and overpressure. In this case, the primary kill mechanism in the mission space was a mix of overpressure and blast, ripping through the open tunnels and destroying critical hardware. The majority of the damage we assessed based on our extensive modeling was a blast layer combined with the impulse extending from the shock. Imagine what this looks like 6 times over.
6 times over. It's really remarkable. One more cut from the briefing that General Kane delivers, cut number 5.
When the crews went to work on Friday, they kissed their loved ones goodbye, not knowing when or if they'd be home. Late on Saturday night, their families became aware of what was happening. And on Sunday, when those jets returned from Whiteman, their families were there. Flags flying and tears flowing. I have chills literally talking about this. The jets rejoined into a formation of 4 airplanes followed by a formation of 3 and came up overhead Whiteman proudly in the traffic pattern, pitching out to land right over the base and landing to the incredible cheers of their families who sacrifice and serve right alongside their family members. Like I said, there were a lot of flags and a lot of tears. One commander told me this is a moment in the lives of our families that they will never forget. That, my friends, is what America's Joint Force does. We think, we develop, we train, we rehearse, we test, we evaluate every single day. And when the call comes to deliver, we do so. I could not be more proud standing up here today of our Joint Force. I'm filled with gratitude that I get to tell their story. And as we stand here right now, our forces remain on a high state of readiness in the region, prepared to defend themselves. And one last thing, our adversaries around the world should know that there are other DTRA team members out there studying targets for the same amount of time, and will continue to do so.
Well said. And Dave McCormick, senator from Pennsylvania, West Point grad, investment banker, wonderful friend of the program, was on Fox News. After watching that briefing, said this, cut number 12.
I don't know how any American could listen to General Kane talk about this mission and not think it was flawlessly executed. We'll get more on the battle damage assessment in the coming days, in the coming weeks, but a remarkable operation. And let's not forget that it was preceded by the Israelis taking out nuclear scientists, taking out the ballistic missile capability, and then something only the United States could do, which is this.
It's impressive. I got to take my relief factor. Got the dreaded overhead bag effect, but the back is better. I told you it would take 3 days of tripling down with the relief factor. Here it is if you're watching on the Salem News Channel. And down it goes. you should be like me. Call 1-800, the number 4, and the word relief, and be like me. Take it every day. When you do something stupid like I did a week ago today, it will take you a while to get that limbered up again and to loosen it up, but Relief Factor will help because it helps reduce inflammation through natural ingredients, and it's been working for me for well over 10 years. The only supplement I've taken for more than 20 is Relief Factor, and I urge you to give it a try. The offer for the new customer is $19.95 for 3 weeks. Call 1-800, the number 4, and the word relief, or go find the starting pack offer, less than $1 a day at relieffactor.com, relieffactor.com. Josh Holmes is, of course, the moderator extraordinaire of the Ruthless Podcast. There he is, the man who was missing for a week when Mossad was running wild around Iran. Just noticing, correlation is not causation, Josh, but you were gone for a week when things were going boom in Iran. Welcome back. I listened to your podcast this morning. You guys were fabulous today, and I'd like you to expand on the comparison to Donald Trump and to Mr. Mamdani, because it was really quite revealing when you juxtaposed them.
Well, look, Hugh, I think we've all noticed this at some level over the last, 6 months or since the election, really, in 2024, is that the two parties that represent the United States have gone in just radically different positions. What Donald Trump has done really over the last 5 days is reestablish America as the leader of the free world. Yeah, you and I remember what that felt like on a day in, day out basis. That's the America that I grew up in. You can see it happening in NATO. You can see it happening, obviously, with the Arab nations in the Middle East and how they respect what Donald Trump has done. It's a comforting feeling. On the other hand, what you're looking at with the Democratic Party in New York City is a rudderless party that has now just gone completely away from anything that could be considered the mainstream of American political thought and become radical, just absolutely insane. This is a guy who wants to abolish the NYPD, just for starters, winning a Democratic primary in the largest city in America. It's nuts, and the direction of the two parties couldn't be more clear.
Well, you laid it out, and I thought very effectively. He's going to close down prisons, and he's going to close down the NYPD. So why does he need to get rid of cash bail? I don't know if it was you or Smug that came up with that observation.
No, it's true. Everything is a downstream of the same, getting at the same thing, which is basically making New York City look an awful lot like Mogadishu, and pretending that that's going to help people. And I
believe it was your line that we're going to have to visit in a Blackhawk before long. But I actually feel bad for people. Was that you? I feel bad for people in New York. I've been listening to the commentary podcast along with you, but you guys live in Washington like I do, and there's a certain amount of collapse in D.C., but it's not that big of a city. New York collapses. It's a lot of collapse. It's a lot of people on streets, a lot of dope, a lot of crime, a lot of subways are scary, a lot of I first set foot in New York in 1980, and it wasn't a nice place. I think we're going back there. And how do you think the grocery stores are going to work out, Josh Holmes?
Yeah, no, they're socializing the grocery stores. That's good. I mean, you can just visit Moscow in 1989 and take a look at the bread lines to see how that's going to work out. You're right. I mean, unfortunately, an awful lot of Americans don't remember the 1970s New York City, but it's not a place that you wanted to visit. The biggest winners of any of this would be the Republican governors in states across this country that can provide a hospitable place to raise a family and build a business, because it certainly isn't going to be New York City if this guy's elected mayor.
Well, let's talk about whether he can be elected. He is to the left of AOC, although AOC endorsed him. Do you think Eric Adams can somehow mount maybe I'm not that bad campaign and stop a radical from destroying New York?
It's possible. I mean, look, the complex part about New York politics is so many ballot lines and already many, many different ways to sort of make a small plurality of victory somewhere, and maybe that could work for Eric Adams. Does it occur to you, though, Hugh, like, boy, they've really done a lot to just denigrate the talent pool of candidates that they're throwing out? I mean, basically, this was a choice between a guy who many New Yorkers, this guy was responsible for the death of their grandmother, versus an avowed socialist. And then you've got a guy in Eric Adams, wherever you think of him, he didn't do either one of those things. But where is the leadership of the Democratic Party, New York and beyond, because at this point it seems like a rudderless ship.
Curtis Silva has been my colleague and friend in the radio business for 20 years. Nice guy. Not going to win as a Republican. I hope he drops out. I really do think the city cannot afford. They got used to having 12 years of Blumenthal and 8 years of Giuliani, or vice versa. I can't remember which way it worked. But the radical nature of de Blasio, they tried to correct to Eric Adams, and now they're going off the cliff. How bad do you think it could get, and what would the effect be on the national brand of the Democrats?
I mean, I think it could be catastrophic. I do think it has a national brand bleed over, and there's two ways of looking at this, right? You could take a super cynical view of it and say, all right, you guys get your chance. Run with that platform of getting rid of the NYPD and socializing grocery stores, and let's see how it works out for you. And there's no question it would be an utter failure, and that is a brand that the Democrats would ultimately have to carry. But the problem is, this is like a crown jewel city in the United States of America. You can't just let these things go on a social experiment or a political experiment. So there is a calculation that you have to come to if you're a reasonable voter in New York about whether or not something less bad is something that you can stomach. It's a sad situation, but one entirely of the making of today's Democratic Party, where the energy is off the left-hand side of the map.
All right, one quick question, Josh, for exit purposes. The reaction to this very successful military strike that General Kane explained in detail today has been mind-boggling. And also, by the way, the CNN report from the two anonymous people with low confidence is all over regime media in Iran, depressing the people of Persia. It just makes me crazy that these leakers don't understand the propaganda wins they give to the bad guys.
It also makes absolutely no sense. There was one stated mission by Donald Trump, and it was to go and eliminate the nuclear capabilities of Iran. Meanwhile, for the previous 4 days, Israel had just completely destroyed all kinds of missile defense capabilities within. And they were basically doing an Oshkosh air show over Tehran for 4 days. Does anyone think, even just for a moment, that if we didn't get what we intended to, that we wouldn't just go back and do it? Of course not. But that is the fallacy of the media, and their only attempt is to try to make Donald Trump look bad.
That's it. That's their whole policies, and it's not anything on which to build a party. People, you got to listen to today's Ruthless podcast. It's a great recap of the crazy week we've just been through. And all the fellas are back, so head over to Comfortably Smug on X, or to Holmes Josh on X, or to John Ashbrook or Michael Duncan, but mostly go like and subscribe to the Ruthless podcast. If you wish to opine, you have to like and subscribe. Thank you, Mr. Holmes.
You're a good friend. Thank you,
about
Hugh.
A brand new sponsor. Americans for a Balanced Budget is our sponsor, and they have a new website, StopHealthCostHikes.com. Now, our friends at Americans for a Balanced Budget are sponsoring this website and this read, StopHealthCostHikes.com. And Adam said in my ear, you got to go slow on this. It's a complicated website. StopHealthCostHikes.com. StopHealthCostHikes.com. They're afraid in the reconciliation process, the House and the Senate are doing a bunch of things that are not going to do anything about fixing runaway health care costs, but are going to actually increase those costs. Now, I don't know what their particular argument is because the bill is so big, but I do know that Americans for a Balanced Budget, very reputable group, and I will trust the information that they've got over at StopHealthCostHikes.com, and you should go check it out as well. StopHealthCareCosts.com. I got it wrong. StopHealthCostHikes.com. 4 words. StopHealthCostHikes.com. I want to tell you about dinner I had last night. I was in the Beltway, and my friends from the American Legislative Exchange Council, we all got together, and maybe 20 people in the room. And Lisa Nelson, the chairman, and John Williams, the president and CEO, chief economist, are there, and a group of their supporters and me. And we're all wonky, nerdy policy people. So we're actually getting excited about the fact that New Hampshire became the 17th state in the union to adopt universal school choice. There wasn't any Granite Stater there. But we're all talking about how this might, we're going to watch the census data to see who from Massachusetts is moving up there to get their kids out of crazy Boston schools and to escape Massachusetts. But without going too far into the north, where they've got boys playing girls sports in Maine and a dug-in governor. So we're going to be watching New Hampshire very, very closely. But the American Legislative Exchange Council gets wonky about everything. They now have a brand new policy rating on state labor policy. And this is what they do. They just compare and contrast. Who's got the best right to work protection? Who's got the Janus rights? That means you cannot have your union pick your pocket without your consent. I mean, you have to affirmatively give. The report identifies where lawmakers and the state legislatures are clearing mobility paths up for workers. Top 5 states. Number 1, Arizona, with a very narrow majority in one of the houses. Doug Ducey still pushed through a lot of labor reforms before he left town. And Arizona is the number 1. Number 2, Utah. They're all in the top 5 areas. Number 3 is Georgia, where Brian Kemp and the state legislature have really turned that into a workers' paradise. 4 is Arkansas. 5 is Florida. Those are the best places for workers' rights, not being put upon by unions. The bottom 5, number 46, Connecticut. Number 47, New York. Number 48, Oregon. Number 49, Massachusetts. And the worst state for worker freedom and freedom from the oppression of union is Alaska. Go into Alaska and you're going to join a union up there. They're going to make you join the union. And so I'm telling you, this is one of the reasons you want to get the ALEC newsletter, alec.com/Hugh, ALEC, as an American Legislative Exchange Act, American Legislative Exchange Council.com/Hugh, at .org. Oh boy, I've been traveling today. alec.org/Hugh. And we were out too late. We had too much fun last night because where else are you going to find 25 people who want to sit around and talk about marginal rates decreasing in Ohio to 2.75% flat tax, all that kind of stuff. It was a nerd's delight. I had a wonderful time. You'll love ALEC as well. Head over to American Legislative Exchange Council, alec.org/Hugh, and get the state of the state. Now I want to remind people about andrewandtodd.com. Because I told you my kids were trying to buy a house and they didn't get it. That's okay. There'll be another house. Someone came in over the top. That's fine. It's a tough market in some places. It's not so tough in others. It will be better, no matter where you are, if you arrive at your seller's auction with a pre-approved qualified mortgage. That means not only do you get pre-approved and told how much you can borrow for, they give you a letter that will guarantee you the mortgage. So you can give it to the seller and say, I have a guaranteed mortgage from Sierra Pacific Mortgage. andrewandtodd.com or with Sierra Pacific Mortgage. Call them at 888-888-1172. Get the letter. Get squared away on how much you can afford. Get squared away on how much you're going to put down. Get squared away on your rate. If you're a veteran, you don't have to put any money down. If you're an FHA, first-time home buyer, you're going to get special deals. If you're a senior citizen and you're living in a house and you paid it off and you want to get some money out of it, that's a reverse mortgage. No matter what you need, do it with andrewandtodd.com, 888-888-1172. Finally, I want to tell everyone about there that besttalkgrill.com is my tried and true sponsor, and they have got the absolute fastest burners in the country. Rhett has been sending me stuff about how they go from 0 to 1,000 degrees in 3 minutes. And that's what you want in a grill. You want it to be hot. You want it to sear in the flavor in the beef. You want it to make your chicken absolutely juicy. You want your fish done well but not destroyed by that. That's besthotgrill.com. And they come in all sizes, and you can try it before you buy it. But before you do anything, visit their website, besthotgrill.com, because you are going to love what Rhett and Irene and the whole team at Best Hot Grill make in America, service in America, deliver in America. And remember, you can try it before you buy it in every size. And if you forgot Dad or Grandpa, make it up for them this weekend with a besthotgrill.com. Alex Gray is the CEO of American Global Strategy. He used to be the chief of staff of the National Security Council in Trump 1. In fact, he served all 4 years in Trump 1, but now he's running a global consulting firm, so he can't actually know what happened. But I want to know what you think happened on Friday night last, Alex. How effective was America's strike?
Well, Hugh, thanks for having me back. I think as we're waiting for the battle damage assessment and we're waiting to have a real sense of, and again, these things take time, and we know it's going to take a little bit of time before we know with absolute certainty what happened. My guess is that we have been more effective than not in neutralizing a significant chunk of Iran's nuclear program. There are going to be aspects of it that we probably are going to have some degree within the intelligence community of ambiguity about, some degree of disagreement, consensus even within the intelligence community, as you know, Hugh, is often elusive. But I think we're going to get to a point in the not too distant future where we have a decent degree of confidence that the Iranians have seen a very, very substantial setback to their program. And I think the significant strategic part of that, Hugh, is that the Iranian supreme leader has been telling his people and his followers for 30 years that if Iran has a nuclear weapon, they will be able to deter anyone in the West from interfering or overthrowing the regime or acting against what they perceive as their interests. This shows, from a legitimacy standpoint, that the supreme leader could not have been more wrong, that a nuclear program was in no way a guarantee of security for the regime. In fact, just the opposite. And I think we're yet to figure out fully what the reverberations of that miscalculation are.
Alex Gray, I've asked a few people. I want your opinion on this. After 9/11, the United States of America was in a state of shock for a while, and it took a long time to come out of that state of shock. After 10/7, Israel was in a state of shock that was they were on their back and reeling for a couple of weeks. How much of a shock do you think it is to the regime in Iran to have the skies basically controlled by the Israelis and the Americans for 2 weeks, and we can do it again tomorrow if we need to?
Yeah. Well, I think it's the biggest shock since 1988 and the end of the Iran-Iraq war and the tanker war with the United States in the late 1980s when the United States was able to neutralize a big chunk of the Iranian Navy. I think that the regime has lied to its people and even to a large part of its elites that somehow this nuclear program served as a deterrent, that somehow being a global pariah strengthened the Ayatollah's hands. And I think the shock that they're now figuring out is that none of those things have been true. And now the regime and its followers have to wrestle with the fact that a quarter century of this rogue nuclear program has left the economy, their international position, and now their military, their proxies, certainly over the last year, and now their home defense in shambles. And that's something that's going to take a very long time for the regime to be able to restore confidence in.
Now, I'm wondering, Alex, we got an immediate leak from the DIA of a low confidence report that was interpreted to mean we hadn't succeeded. That's been repudiated now by General Kane, by the Israelis. I guess I trust the Israelis intel a lot better than some lowlife at DIA. But did you have to put up with this kind of leaking, contrary to the national interest when you were at the White House?
Maybe once on a good day, Hugh. More often, this was a multi-time a day occurrence. This is what the intelligence community, and when you find out who these leakers are, it's shocking because it's almost always people who don't actually have access to the most exquisite intelligence, who don't know actually what's going on, who are 4 or 5 compartments removed from our most sensitive and exquisite intelligence. These are people with a grudge. Oftentimes they're contractors or they're very low-level analysts. And even, let's put those people aside, the intelligence community, the different agencies disagree with each other all the time. And there are differing assessments between CIA and DIA and NSA and the Bureau of Intelligence and Research at State on just about every issue every issue of concern. And you have to scroll down to the bottom of these reports, and at the bottom it'll say this agency concurred with the assessment, this agency disagreed with the assessment. And so for policymakers, it's a real challenge to weed through some of this stuff But the bottom line, Hugh, is I think we're moving now towards a place where the public domain seems to show that we had more success than not, regardless of what a couple of leakers have to say.
And the last question, Alex Gray. It looks like the Israelis developed some advanced weaponry that we didn't even know about. I'm calling it the Yark Arrow from the Guardians of the Galaxy. They took out all those nuclear scientists at the same time on the first night of the war with something we don't know anything about. Do you think we have our best and brightest minds in the Pentagon working on like devices? Like, obviously, this MOP, General Kane said today, it got started 17 years ago.
Yeah, I mean, one thing I'd say, Hugh, when I got to be chief of staff of the NSC, I think some of us spend a lot of time being very pessimistic about America's defense capabilities, as, frankly, in some ways we should be. We're not spending what we should. We're not spending it on the things we should. The Chinese, particularly, are doing some very impressive things. But when you get to that level where you get access to everything and you see the most sensitive R&D programs, the most sensitive intelligence and covert programs, what I really came away with at the end of my tenure was we still are the world's leading superpower. We still have capabilities no one else, including our friends in Israel, have. And that's why it's so dangerous for our enemies to underestimate us, like they did under President Biden. Because if they do, unfortunately, they are going to find out that we are not to be trifled with, and they're going to take us down a road where ultimately the United States is going to have to get into a conflict and finish it, which is something no one wants, which is why having that peace through strength deterrence is so important before we have to show the world just how capable we really are.
30 seconds, Alex. Are you surprised that Iran did not get off any effective cyber attack on Israel? I mean, they actually didn't touch him.
It doesn't surprise me, Hugh, in the sense that the Israeli counter cyber capability is the envy of the world. And we know what the startup nation has done in their active offensive cyber capabilities. They're equally adept on the defensive side. So, frankly, as we've seen now, Hugh, across vectors, missile programs, cyber, naval, air, the Iranians, in some sense, have been overstating their capabilities for internal and external consumption for decades now. And unfortunately, too many in the West bought into the propaganda.
Boy, that emperor has no clothes at all. Alex Gray from American Global Strategy, thank you for spending time with me today. Brett McGurk is one of that very small group of people who serve year in and year out in national security jobs in different administrations. One of my very best friends, Dan Poneman, served for H.W. Bush and Clinton and Obama because he's a nuclear guy and he understands nuclear stuff. Brett McGurk has served George W. Bush, Barack Obama, Donald Trump, Joe Biden. He's out right now, but he showed up on CNN yesterday to give a assessment of the assessments. Cut number 6.
What we now know from that briefing, first time we know it, is that as it was designed, as these massive ordnance penetrators with significant computer software engineering went directly down those 3 ventilator shafts, specifically as designed. And until you actually do it, you never know if it's going to work. It worked. It seems to have worked flawlessly. That is very important information. He also pointed out some things we take for granted. A Patriot interceptor is traveling at 3,000 miles an hour, about Mach 4, to hit a ballistic missile, traveling at about 6,000 miles an hour, Mach 8. This is really difficult. We take for granted how this stuff all works. I thought that was very important to lay out. So as I come out of this briefing, I now know BDA level 2, as I mentioned. Level 1, first 24 hours, you're looking at imagery. Level 2, did the ordnance work? Did everything go as we had wanted? The answer now is yes. And we're now in the phase of level 3, collecting all sources of information and then putting that together with nuclear experts to determine if they have these pieces and parts here, could they reconstitute them? With some political analysts to say, would the Iranians do that? What would be the restraints? To then have a comprehensive assessment of where we are. With the objective being Iran can never have a nuclear weapon and its enrichment program has to be completely destroyed. I think from what I've seen, the 20,000 centrifuges, you had about 17,000 in Natanz, about 3,000 in Fordo, they are all completely destroyed. I am very confident those centrifuges are gone. The Israelis destroyed the centrifuge manufacturing production facilities that we know of. Isfahan, which is the conversion facility, key part of the fuel cycle, also appears to have been destroyed. So if you add it up from what we're seeing, massive catastrophic setback for Iran's program. The term of art, obliterated, destroyed, I kind of step out of that. This is an analytical process. It's important for the professionals now in the intelligence community to be able to do their work without political pressure and come out with their assessments. And we'll know soon enough. There's a lot of work going on here from U.S. intelligence agencies, from Mossad and the Israelis, from other partners. But I thought that briefing was important. We now know that operation that was developed over multiple administrations worked exactly as it was designed. So I didn't know that. I couldn't have confirmed that 24 hours ago. I now know those 3 ventilators, they went down there and it worked. That's new. And that means probably Fordo is rendered inoperable for the foreseeable future, probably
forever. And people shouldn't. It was a wonderful, extraordinary achievement by the American military, following 2 extraordinary weeks of achievements by the Israeli Defense Forces. And Iran is a shattered regime. Normally, Ben Domenech, Fox News contributor and editor-at-large for The Spectator, is my Friday guest, but he's out of pocket tomorrow. So I want to talk to him today about this remarkable week that has been since I last spoke with him, and also to congratulate him on the imminent arrival. Not imminent. I'm not sure when baby boy Domenech is going to show up in the world, but that was announced yesterday. And I listened to your podcast today, Ben, and apparently the names have to be a little bit Western coded, a little bit country. So I looked up all the names in the Louis L'Amour series that Ike read during World War II. And we've got Terrell, William Tell Sackett, Orrin Sackett, Parmalee Sackett, Ethan Sackett, Echo Sackett, and Joe Sackett. On the countryside, how about Luke? I'm just don't know.
Hugh, well, you're a good egg for doing that. I'm more of a Zane Grey guy than a Louis L'Amour guy, but my wife likes Louis L'Amour, so I will make that note to her. So, look, it's been an incredible week, and I didn't want to miss it, even though I'm going to be in Arizona tomorrow, and so I was not able to join you in the normal window. But look, I am just blown away by the amount of news to handle this week. I mean, we had, so much on our plate to talk about. Where do you want to start?
Well, I want to start by asking you a question that not many people have been talking about. How do you think the Iranian regime feels? I know how America felt on 9/12. I imagine I know pretty much what Israel felt like on 10/8. But now we're in the week after a crushing defeat of a regime that has been ruthlessly in power for 46 years, revealed to just be a throne of lies. What do you think the regime elites are thinking right now?
I think the regime elites right now are trying to figure out where they're going to run to. I mean, quite honestly, it's a situation that I think they never thought they would be facing, and I think that it's one that has look. Some of these things, it's one of those situations, Hugh, where things change not all then all at once, and I think that in this case, this was such a shock to the system, such an unexpected result in terms of the outcome. It's such an unexpected problem for the regime because I think that they really thought that they had a lot more time. I think that they thought that they could play the same game with this administration that they've played with administrations prior, and they discovered to their shock that this was not the case, and that in reality, what we see here is a situation where our allies, namely Israel in this context, have the capability to clear the path for America to do something. And under President Trump, they are willing to do things that other presidents would not do and to take risks, by the way. And that's part, I think, of the chip on the shoulder that people like Pete Hegseth and others have about this operation is everyone seems to be acting as if it was a foregone conclusion that it would work. That this would be something that would be functionally able to achieve the American aims without risk of life to any American soldier, to any American bomber, to anyone. And that's not the case at all, Hugh.
No, the last time we tried something in Iran was Desert One, in 1979, and it ended up with helicopters
not a
crashing in
foregone
the desert.
conclusion at all. And so
Right.
I think part of the reason that you hear the irritation in Pete Hegseth's voice today, talking about the media and talking about the way this is being covered, it's not just about the fact that that CNN, in a way that I think is very inappropriate, and I'm glad that some other people in the media who are not necessarily big Trump fans, Mark Halperin was calling it out this morning, other people were calling it out as well, to run with this low information, immediate turnaround intel report to claim that the president was lying about the effectiveness of this, it's not just about that. It's about the fact that the media seems to be so ignorant of the risks involved in this, of the monumental display of American force that went into this, that they aren't even willing to give the president credit or his administration credit or the people who wear the uniform credit. And that's something that I think is just...
Well, the damning indictment, Ben, it's in regime media. Regime media is using the CNN report to tell their captive population that what they saw they didn't really see, and the Americans didn't destroy the nuclear program. So the only people CNN hurt are the people of Iran who want to be free. And I really think that was the most irresponsible thing. But after watching, and I played a bunch of it in hour one, General Kane's discussion today, how can anyone think anything's working in Fordo, and who wants to go in there to find out?
I'm sorry. You want to sign up? Not Bertrand, if you want to go parachute in there and then look underneath the ground and decide for yourself, be my guest. But it's one of these situations where, look, we have dealt with this regime for so long. We know how willing they are to lie. We know how willing they are to lie to their own people. We know how much their persistence as a regime depends on those lies, depends on the narrative that they tell their people, and how much they work very hard to keep them from knowing the truth. And in this instance, I think, unfortunately, the knee-jerk reaction, as it always is with anything that Donald Trump does, is to turn around and say, well, he must be lying. He cannot be telling us the truth about this. And I think that in this case, look, every bit of evidence that we have, including from our friends around the globe and their own international intelligence services, we can say this operation, if it did not completely obliterate this nuclear program, it sent it back to the Stone Age. And they're going to be trying to rebuild it again, of course, because that's what they always do. But I think that this does provide a window, perhaps, for some kind of negotiation, for some kind of reconsideration that opens up the possibility that we might actually have something change there more fundamentally beyond just the nuclear program.
Now I want you to compare and contrast, Ben, the mullahs and the theocratic elites with the never-Trumpers. Both have enormous sunk costs in the prior positions that they've taken, from which they find it very difficult to walk away, even though everything in the world. I listened to, I've long enjoyed the writing of David Frum, though he's lost his mind over Trump, and I listened to his podcast yesterday, and he's explaining how the success of Donald Trump makes him even more dangerous as a dictator in waiting. I mean, it's just...
Lord.
It's right before he interviews Tina Brown.
You can do that. When I hear
Life's
something
too short.
Stupid, I have to turn things off.
Well, they're trapped. Like the Iranian regime is trapped in a mirage about the world, and they can't get out of it. And Trump no longer cares about them. Nobody cares about them anymore. But I don't know how they get back, and I don't know how the mullahs reconstitute a regime that anyone believes.
Look, I read the New Yorker, I read the New York Times, I read occasionally the Washington Post, so that's a little harder. I read Politico, I read all these places, and even David Frum's podcast. That's just a bridge too far from me. But the thing that I will say is you are completely correct about the sunk costs associated with this. And the fact that they won't respond to a decision that, quite frankly, there were people who were writing about Donald Trump in 2015, 2016 as a Lindberghian figure, as someone who was going to be, prostrating himself before the dictators of the world, as someone who would be unwilling to stand up for America's friends. And instead, what do we have today? We have the majority of NATO being willing to actually spend what they promised to spend and beyond for a very long time. They've avoided doing that. And we have an Iranian regime that is back on its heels and potentially has an opening that we, perhaps never would have seen. I mean, I certainly didn't know that we would see this within my lifetime. But I do think that this is a situation where if you can't reevaluate after this week the way that you talk about this president and his foreign policy, about his devotion to American national security and interests in a way that is responsible, you should just shut up and just stop. I mean,
and it's an exit that you can take. It's got a big exit sign over it which says, okay, I have my problems with Trump, but let me just make it clear this was in the America's best interest, and I salute the president and the men and women of our military, and we're going to celebrate that. Let me play for you for a moment a NATO moment yesterday that Dwayne just dug up for me. Let's play Donald Trump and Marco Rubio, the daddy question.
Mark Rutte, the NATO chief, who is your friend, he called you daddy earlier. Do you regard your NATO allies as kind of children?
No, he likes me. I think he likes me. If he doesn't, I'll let you know. I'll come back and I'll hit him hard, okay? No?
Do you see Rubio is laughing behind him, Ben Domenech. 30 seconds of the break.
Look, I think that was one of the funniest things I've ever seen on the international stage. It was absolutely hilarious. I would have had the exact same response that Marco Rubio did. And look, this is I actually think that reporter was kind of getting a kick out of it. I think she was glad she got to ask that question before somebody else did. But it was very entertaining to see. But again, this is just how much his relationship with the world and with those European leaders has changed from the first term. And I think it's a very good benefit to us and to the world to see that happen.
When President Trump walked out on Friday night, he had Vice President Vance on his right, Secretary Rubio, Secretary Hegseth on his left. I immediately thought those three guys can run for president, along with Cotton, Pompeo, Elise Stefanik, a whole bunch of Doug Burgum. Mm. We got a bench. The Democrats do not have a bench.
Yes, I mean, I think that's absolutely true. But I also think this is a situation where we should appreciate that is not a foregone conclusion in terms of the way that this nation is currently going. And we'll obviously come back and have a conversation about what's taking place in New York. But we shouldn't just assume that this is an automatic situation where one of these people is just going to automatically emerge. It's going to be a fight, and I think that the American people can certainly see right now that there's one side that is more serious, but the other situation that I think has to be considered right now is that this is not a situation where you can just count your chickens before they've hatched. You have to actually win the argument, and I think that we've seen the kind of skill that these guys have in a clear-eyed view that understands the world and how ridiculous the other side is, but you still have to earn it. And so I think that one of the things that worries me about this current moment is that I think there are a lot of people who are kind of standing on the results of this past election as if it's something that ends an argument, and I don't think it does at all.
Oh, it doesn't. And in fact, we got Mike Rogers up in Michigan, but we got to figure out how to get Tom Tillis over the line in North Carolina. Susan Collins should win handily in Maine, but we need a candidate in Georgia. We need a candidate maybe in Nevada. I'm not sure. I think there's a seat out there that's in play. We have to recruit. Mitch McConnell used to say, whenever I had to go over to the Senate, first thing you got to win. And that means candidate recruitment. And it also means, and this is the last question before you go back, do you think the big, beautiful bill gets to the president's desk by July 4? That's 8 days away.
I think that's a steep climb. I would be surprised if it does. It will get to the desk, but a big thing to learn from the last time around when they were trying to get this stuff passed in 2017 is that it came in so late that you didn't have really the argument to make to the American people into the midterm election about the benefits of the economic policy that you had. People didn't have the time to see the results. And I think that the president and his team are very confident with the results of what this bill would produce in terms of economic growth, in terms of its impact on the family, in particular, working families across America would benefit from this. But I think that they need to get it across to the president's desk as soon as possible so that they can start running on it, because it's everything that they've been claiming to stand for a long time, combined in a big package that they need to get passed.
They absolutely, if they could by July 4th, there's a chance they could save the House. Otherwise, the title charts of American politics are not good for the Republicans in 2026. The only good news coming out of New York City this week is that we are alert to the perils of ranked voting, which is a mess in Maine, and it's a mess in New York, and nobody saw this coming. But Ben Domenech, just hold forth a little bit on what Mamdani means for the Democrats and for the national political scene.
So I'm going to invoke my wife here because she, unlike me, lived in New York basically since her college days back at Columbia for about 2 decades. And she was very early on to this Mamdani figure, even when people were saying, "Oh, it's impossible that he could win," and advising everyone around her, absolutely he could. And I think a part of that too, by the way, is that she pays attention to Instagram and TikTok a lot more than I do. She was right, and she thinks that he can win in the fall too. And she doesn't think that it's at all a foregone conclusion that this is a beneficial situation for Eric Adams to hold on, or for New York to do something that is actually sane. This is totally crazy. It's lunatic. I mean, it's off. I mean, this guy makes Bill de Blasio look like a Republican. I mean, it's true. But here's the thing that I think we should understand. He does have a serious following and a base of support among a cadre of people who are now in much higher positions of power and relevance within the American left than what we've seen them have in the past. Do you know who Stavros Halkias is, Hugh?
No.
Stavros is part of the name. I can't actually say the name of the podcast because it would be an FCC violation.
Okay,
but
good. Please don't. Good.
So, but he is someone who is a leading voice on the American left. He is a comedian, a very funny one, in fact, and he came out and endorsed Mamdani and made a big play for him, as did Emily Ratajkowski, as did all these other celebrities, as did all these different Brooklyn figures who speak for the community, as did AOC. It's a combination of people who I think are thought of incorrectly by a lot of older voters as being youngsters, whippersnappers, people who don't speak for an actual cohort, but they do. And in this case, they've spoken with a very loud voice. The ideas that he is espousing are lunatic, but I also think that they truly do have purchase within this current American left, and I don't think they're going away anytime soon. And that's why I say people shouldn't be resting on their laurels or assuming that the argument's going to be won when it comes to the contest between this type of socialism and the kinds of capitalist pro-business policy, pro-freedom policies that we've seen hold at play, which used to be bipartisan, but now no longer are.
Now, Ben, just ruthless Machiavellian Ben at this point. Do the Republicans want him to win, or do we want Curtis Sliwa, who's been a colleague of mine for 20 years, to step aside and everybody get behind the Eric Adams not so bad movement? Or do we want Mamdani to win in order to see what happens? I mean, we see Chicago. I don't need to see it again, but boy, you can't miss it if it's New York.
Look, I believe that sometimes, as we said, as we say about democracy, the voters get what they want and they get it good and hard. And I think that in this case, the truth is that there are a lot of Republicans who do want him to win, and including, by the way, you said ruthless. Those guys definitely are in that category. They want to see the ramifications of policy actually be put into place. They want to see the government grocery stores. For my own part, because I actually have sympathy for the people of New York, because I have friends who live and work there, I don't want to see that because I don't want to be in a situation where we're having to go in and clean up the kind of mess. Civilization can be lost pretty quickly if you don't stand up for it and fight for it. And I don't.
I went to New York for the first time in 1980 as an adult and having to get a job in an apartment, and that was pretty much near the bottom of the first New York bottom. And then Giuliani came along, and then Bloomberg, and then it became a wonderful place to go to. And when I was working for NBC, I loved going up there and going to 30 Rock and running around from the Village up to the Upper West Side. It was great fun. Now again, I think it's going to be a disastrous thing, but a disastrous thing that we cannot not watch. Now, tell me about the implication. Is he? He's obviously an anti-Zionist. Is he an anti-Semite?
He certainly codes that way, and I think he plays into that. And the ideas that he's espoused, just in his own Twitter feed and things of that nature, are things that certainly indicate that he's in that category. I can't speak to a guy's heart, but I certainly see where he is on the spectrum when it comes to these issues, and the idea that if Bibi Netanyahu comes to New York to speak at the UN, that he's going to have him arrested. I take that very seriously. I take it.
Wait, he said that?
Yes, he has said that. He has said that he believes he should be arrested as a war criminal. And
wow.
so it's, look, this is one of these things where you're dealing, again, he makes Bill de Blasio look like a Republican. I'm not kidding.
I just don't understand. Maybe it's because our public school system has condemned a generation of young adults to political illiteracy and historical agnosticism. But we've seen this show before a lot of times in a lot of places around the world. It doesn't work.
Nope. It never works. There's always to it. And I think Democrats are playing with fire with this guy.
And does that help us politically if, in fact, it comes to fruition? By us, I mean Republicans, and it's a nightmare. Last question. If it's a nightmare, as we expected,
I think it's a nightmare. Opposite argument, and not just assume that things are going to go their way.
All right, Ben Domenech, we're losing you. Thank you, buddy. I appreciate having a great week off, and I appreciate you joining me early so we can get your insights into this week. Follow Ben at B. Domenech. His Big Ben podcast is a joy, although I have to begin to get a trigger warning about Pacers talk. There was more Pacers talk today. And I feel bad for Halliburton. I mean, no one should go down that way. And that's a really good question you asked. Would you rather have lost in Game 6 or lose them that way in Game 7? I'd have rather lost in Game 6 because that's not an easy to come back from injury, is it?
Answered it the same way, Hugh. I would have answered it the same way. I should chose otherwise.
Yeah. Well, true fans are true fans, but I'm telling you, it's a tough way to go out. Thank you, Ben Domenech. Let me remind everyone, I'm in the Relief Factor studio. I took it in hour 1. I'm reminding you in hour 2. I take it every single day. And I'm feeling a lot better than a week ago today when I cleared all the books out of here. And, books pile up in studios the way that they pile up in bookstores. And eventually you got to clean them out and take them to a thrift shop and give them away so that they can generate some income for the halt, the blind, the lame, and the needy. And I'm glad to do that, but I shouldn't have lifted 2 boxes at once, and out it went. So I just doubled down on my Relief Factor for a good 10 days. And it's great. I'm going to keep doing it. I've done it for a week. I'm going to keep doing it for 2 more days. I will be out again, I think, walking tomorrow and trundling by Saturday. It's my hope, because Relief Factor really does work. Icarian and curcumin, resveratrol, omega. Every packet of Relief Factor comes with 4 pills in it. They are natural supplements, doctor studied, clinically tested, designed to help your body's anti-inflammatory natural system kick in. That's what, when you do ice and then heat and then ice and then heat, that's what you're doing when you pull the muscle. That's what Relief Factor helps you recover from more quickly. Get over those minor aches and pains. Get over those very nagging injuries when they occur. Anyone's got back issues knows what it's like for a good week after you do something stupid. Relief Factor makes it easier to recover. Call 1-800-4 and the word relief, or go to their website for the starter pack, $19.95, less than $1 a day, at relieffactor.com, relieffactor.com.
Boom, 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 boom.
That's how it sounded at Fordo and other facilities a week ago tomorrow. And today, Carolyn Leavitt, White House press secretary, addressed the press corps about the leak and the damage done in Iran, cut number 7.
This was a low confidence preliminary intelligence assessment, and the entirety of that assessment was not leaked to the media. Only tidbits of that assessment were leaked to CNN. And we have seen this playbook run before, where you have people in the intelligence community, or perhaps on Capitol Hill, we don't know, but I believe the FBI is investigating to find out who that leaker was, because it's illegal, and they should be held accountable for that, leaked bits and pieces of an intel assessment to push a false narrative. And it's to the same reporter, I will add, Natasha Bertrand of CNN, who has done this in the past. In 2020, it was Natasha Bertrand who had 51 intelligence analysts falsely lie to her, but she still put it on paper for some reason, that the Hunter Biden laptop story was Russian disinformation. We all know that's not true, right? We can all agree on that now. That was a lie from the intelligence community. Also in 2020, this same reporter, Natasha Bertrand, wrote that a top intel agency ruled out the man-made lab leak theory of the coronavirus origins. Again, the president was right about that. This reporter wrote a lie from the intelligence community to seek a narrative she wanted to prove. And guess what? We now know that's the truth. Also, in 2024, Bertrand pushed the suckers and losers hoax. She also pushed the fine people hoax, which was taking the president's words purposely out of context. And then last October, and I believe this is notable, Natasha Bertrand published an article in Politico from the intelligence agency. She said that John Ratcliffe was speaking without any evidence when he said Iran was attempting to undermine President Trump's presidential campaign. And then we, of course, found out that was absolutely true. In fact, the Biden administration declassed an intel report which said they had high confidence that Iran had done exactly what Ratcliffe alleged. They did run an influence campaign to hurt President Trump's candidacy. In fact, we know the Iranians tried to take President Trump's life. And so this is a reporter who has been unfortunately used by people who dislike Donald Trump in this government to push fake and false narratives. She should be ashamed of herself. And that's not what reporting is. Journalism is trying to find the facts and the truth. And this week we saw this same reporter being used to push a fake narrative to try to undermine the President of the United States, and more importantly, the brave fighter pilots who conducted one of the most successful operations in United States history. And I think the American people fully know that this operation was a complete and total success.
She added cut number 8.
When we look at the entirety of the intelligence that we have to this date, it concludes that these strikes on the Iranian nuclear facilities were absolutely successful. It was a total obliteration, as the president said. And not only does our own intelligence say that, but also the Iranian foreign minister has said that. We saw Israel conclude the same thing based on their own intelligence. We also had the United Nations say that as well. So I think the only other time the United Nations, Israel, Iran, and the United States has agreed on something is that the sky is blue, but they all agree that Iran's nuclear facilities were completely demolished.
All right, that is the bottom line. Now, how did markets react today as even more evidence of the success of the American strike and the Israeli campaign emerged? Good day on Wall Street. All right, this is brought to you by our friends at American Federal. If you're going to buy or sell gold, do it with Nick Grovich. If you're watching on the Salem News Channel, you'll see his number right there, 1-800-221-7694, 1-800-221-7694. Talk to Nick or one of his team. Tell him what your needs are, what you want to diversify, whether you want gold or silver, platinum, whether you want to buy a lot or a little or on a regular basis. Nick will figure it out with you. Transparent, honest, effective, gets it done. Now today, the Dow was up almost 1%, 0.94%. The S&P was up 0.8%, and the NASDAQ was up 0.97%. So all across the board, every sector felt pretty good about the world, and oil remained around $64, $65 a barrel because they don't think Iran's getting back into a fight soon, nor is Israel or the United States. Gold remained at $3,343 an ounce. Now, when the bombs were falling and the tensions were highest, gold soared up past $3,400 an ounce. And just late last year, I was talking about, I wonder if it's going to get to $3,000. Well, it's blown through 3,000, gone up more than 10% since then, early in the year. I don't make recommendations on when to buy or not. I did say in passing the other day, this looks like a bottom, but I don't know. All I know is that for the past 100 years, gold more than kept pace with inflation, and diversifying your portfolio is a smart thing to do. And if you're going to try and do that, take some chips off the table, maybe buy some precious metals because you made a lot of money in the stock market. Call Nick Grovich and his team, 1-800-221-7694, or visit AmericanFederal.com. It's 1-800-221-7694, or AmericanFederal.com. Josh Kraushaar is the editor-in-chief of Jewish Insider. Josh, what a week. I want to read from a Jewish Insider story that just posted. Lieutenant General Eyal Zamir, the IDF Chief of Staff, said that, quote, based on the assessment of senior officers in the IDF intelligence, the damage to Iran's nuclear program is systemic, severe, broad, and deep, pushed back by years. I really do not know what that DIA leak was about, but boy, are they looking foolish right now.
Well, Hugh, thanks for having me. And look, this has been quite a consequential month in the Middle East. And yeah, I'm not a nuclear expert, but I like to listen to trusted analysts who are closest to the situation. The IDF chief of staff would certainly count among them, but there are a lot of other nuclear experts who have come out, many of them quoted in the story that we ran today, that I would, as an analyst and as someone who has been reporting and leading our team in covering these issues, would trust a lot of the Israeli analysts and a lot of the independent reports that have also been out over a leak that came out from DIA, which DIA of all the many U.S. intel agencies is not maybe not at the top of the list too in terms of its visibility in Iran's nuclear facilities. So look, I mean, I think we're still going to find out as we get more information. We don't operate a lot of the ability to kind of detect everything that happened. It doesn't happen on social media speed. But certainly the more trusted voices and the folks that have the best intel, the Israelis have just really strong intel on Iran, as we know, and they have been very bullish and very optimistic about how the strikes went.
Now, have you yet seen, and I've been waiting for someone like Mark Dubowitz over at the Foundation for the Defense of Democracies, or anyone who actually has followed Iran for a long time, the expected reaction in the elites of the Iranian regime? They're all of a sudden alone and naked, if I use that reality series. They're lost in they have no idea what hit them. They had no idea they were that vulnerable. And for 2 weeks, they were at the complete mercy of the IDF. What do you think is going to happen to that regime's collective psyche?
Well, you could tell by their essentially crying uncle at the end of the bombing last weekend that they realized how militarily vulnerable they were. The Israelis did most of the work. The Americans finished the job, at least took out and rolled back significantly. I think the most significant nuclear facilities. Look, they're hoping that they can kind of get back to the bargaining table and maybe try to kind of at least shore up their political leadership. We didn't hear from the Ayatollah until today. He was like in a bunker, and it seems like the entire political leadership has not really figured out what hit them. Look, they with this regime in place, Hugh, I know there's a lot of talk about diplomacy and cutting some kind of deal, and hopefully that works out well. But with this regime in place, I still think their goal is a malign one in the region, and it still has to be dealt with. But the most significant threat, the risk of having them get a nuclear weapon, has been rolled back. It seems significant.
Oh, absolutely. Now, what I'm going to is, who can relax in the Iranian regime? They've got to suspect everyone sitting to their left and their right. One of them is a Mossad agent, and they got to worry that there's some colonels in the basement who don't like getting blown up all the time, and that maybe it's time for the mullahs to be moved aside and the remnants of the IRGC to just run a narco state, which is basically what they are now. Any speculation from any informed source in Israel or in the United States about what kind of crisis the Iranian regime's going through?
Well, look, it's remarkable that in that first day of the Israeli operation, they pretty much had penetrated Iranian leadership. They probably had, intel spies on the ground, Mossad on the ground, and that they took out, 12 or maybe a little more than 12 of the top IRGC generals and leaders, which is just a remarkable penetration of the Iranian leadership. I mean, in fact, I think that was the thing that turned the political tide here in the States when Trump saw how successful and remarkable that operation was. He wanted to be part. In addition, he was fully behind and saw the success that was going to come later on. Look, I think they're trying to figure out what hit them. They need to figure out where to go from here. I just don't think that trusting them to lay down their arms and really give up the ambitions of a nuclear program is realistic. That's been, as long as the Ayatollah is in charge, as long as you have these extremists that are in the leadership, and it's theological. That's why Israel was felt, and rightly so threatened by the regime. I don't think it's going to be the character of the regime is going to even now that they're much weakened, I still think that they're still in charge. So I think they're probably,
in the almost 2 years since 10/7, I've talked to a lot of Israeli journalists, Josh, and the overwhelming reaction this week from people like Dr. Oren and Amit Segal and Yossi Klein Halevi was on this program. They're exhausted and they're relieved that they're into a fairly flat stretch. They have to finish Gaza. They have to figure out what to do about the hostages. but they have a breathing space for the first time in a long time. And I think they've restored deterrence in a way that I think was really possible on 10/8. You think deterrence is restored in the region vis-a-vis Israel?
Oh, definitely. I mean, first Israel took out the proxies post October 7th, degraded Hamas, really wiped out Hezbollah, the aftermath of the Syrian regime collapsing. I mean, it's a totally different Middle East. And the capstone was taking out Iran's, or degrading at least significantly, Iran's nuclear facilities. Look, I think we were just reported this afternoon, a report in the Israeli press about Trump trying to wrap up the war. I mean, trying to encourage the Netanyahu government to cut a deal in Gaza and essentially acknowledge that Hamas is severely degraded, work out a deal to get all the hostages home and ending the war, and putting a capstone on this phase of the war and trying to secure peace deals with the other more friendly Arab states, Saudi Arabia in particular, maybe Syria. That would be quite a chapter. It would from a narrative, symbolic point of view, the ending of the degradation of Iran, combined with outreach and diplomacy towards once unfriendly Arab states, would be quite a shift in the Middle East if it does come to fruition.
Quick exit question, Josh. Are your readers disappointed in the Democratic Party? There's been like 2 Democrats who stood up and applauded taking out the threat that has loomed over Israel and the world for 30 years.
Yeah, well, there's the fact that Democrats didn't have any clear support for taking out Iran's nuclear program. It was all over the map, and it was a small faction of stalwart pro-Israel Democrats who spoke up in support of the operation. I think the bigger issue, though, Hugh, is the nomination of Zohran Mamdani in New York City. We were going up with a story right now. Obama's former OMB director, Peter Orszag, just went on television and said the Democratic Party is, quote, becoming increasingly anti-Semitic. So that goes beyond...
Yeah, well, I think he's got grounds for saying that with Mamdani. We will continue to follow that story with you in the months ahead of the Maybe Eric Adams Isn't So Bad show. Stay tuned, and thank you, Josh Kraushaar. Carolyn Levitt had one more thing I want you to hear at the press lectern today in the White House press room. Cut number 9 about President Trump and wanting peace.
The president wants peace. He always has. And right now we're on a diplomatic path with Iran. The president and his team, namely Special Envoy Witkoff, continue to be in communication with the Iranians and especially our Gulf and Arab partners in the region to come to an agreement with Iran. As for our alliance with the State of Israel and that friendship and that partnership between the United States and the State of Israel, I would argue it has never been stronger. And we see a new era in which perhaps some of these Gulf and Arab states can sign on to the Abraham Accords. That was one of the president's most signature accomplishments in his first term, and he'd like to see more of those countries sign on in this second term. And so we look forward to sustaining a long and durable peace in the region, and the president wants to do that through a diplomatic solution. But as he proved on Saturday night, he's not afraid to use strength if we need to do it.
And I think that is a perfect summary. Now I have a question to ask you. Do you know how much you spend on your cell phone? I've made the switch to consumer cellular. If you saw me this week on Hannity, right before me there was a consumer cellular ad. And I thought to myself, okay, people are noticing. They're paying too much to big cellular. And they are going to go and get their pencil out and find out how much they're paying. And then they're going to call consumer cellular and compare. Now, the phone number for consumer cellular is 1-800-411-4454. 1-800-411-4454. If you're a new customer, you want to use my code, HUGH25, and get $25 off. That comes in the form of new customers getting a $5 credit on their first 5 monthly invoices. But you got to call them and use HUGH25, and the phone number is 1-800-411-4454. You can have savings without sacrificing service. You can have the same great service as any other carrier, and you will not notice any difference. You can keep your number, keep your data, keep your contacts, you can keep your device, you can get a new device, you can get a new number, you can start over, or you can get a second phone if you need one just for your family. If you're overwhelmed by business, you just want 2 phones, common site inside the Beltway, not off in other places, but if that's you, do it. But here's the deal. Don't overpay. If you're over 50, you especially have to pay attention to how much gigs are you buying. If you've got an unlimited data plan, maybe that makes sense for you. And if you're over 50, call Consumer Cellular or go to consumercellular.com/Hugh and find out that you can get 2 lines, unlimited data for $60 a month. But you might not need unlimited data. You might only need 5 gigs or 10 gigs. What you got to do is some homework, starting with get your Consumer Cellular person on the line, 1-800-411-4454. Tell them Q25, that's your code, and then walk through what their options are, and then get out your own bill and find out what you're paying for and how much data you're not using. Because you really should make the switch, should investigate getting those savings without any loss of service. I want to go hyper-local for a moment because we've been talking about Iran and Israel and all the different things in the Beltway. I want to zero in on Toledo, Ohio, and the Snake by the Lake. That's Congressional District number 9. It's a crazy district that was drawn to keep Marcy Kaptur in Congress. She managed to survive losing the district to Trump, but she won. Now a young man, Josh Williams, is going to run. He's a state rep, and he joins us now. Josh, you're from Toledo, I believe. So good things do come out of Toledo. I'm from Warren, Ohio, so Toledo Central Catholic used to beat us up repeatedly. But I'm glad to see something good coming out of Toledo. Tell people about yourself.
Yeah, so I'm State Representative Josh Williams. I'm running for the Congressional 9th to finally retire Marcy Kaptur. I was born and raised in the inner city of Toledo, just a poor kid raised by a single mother. I dropped out of high school when I was 18 when I became homeless. Eventually worked at the railroad where I was injured and laid in bed for 6 years. I had tremendous adversity to overcome. I had to learn to walk again after 40 procedures, 5 major procedures on my spine. I entered undergraduate at the age of 30 as a freshman, and in 5 years at the age of 35, I graduated from law school and became a practicing attorney, a constitutional law professor, and went on to be the first Black Republican elected to the Ohio House in 50 years and the first Black majority whip in Ohio's history.
That is kind of remarkable. I am a Buckeye, and I have followed Ohio politics very closely for a long time, and I was saying to myself, I don't remember many Black Republicans in modern Ohio, perhaps during Reconstruction. Josh, what is the status of the map? Because Ohio draws congressional districts more often than kids play with Etch-a-Sketches. What's going on there?
Yeah, so the map will get redrawn again this summer. We anticipate litigation. We're prepared to run in the map as it's drawn now. We should have picked up this seat already in 2 election cycles where we could have been competitive, but we weren't able to get across the finish line in the last election cycle. You know, we saw President Trump do tremendous numbers in this district. Bernie Moreno did tremendous numbers. I did tremendous numbers in this district, but we underperformed on the congressional level last time, and I'm going to make sure that we finally bring the Ohio 9th home to the Republican Party.
Before I forget, what is your political website if people want to help you in this campaign?
Yeah, so if people want to find out more about me, they can go to joshwilliamsforohio.com. That's joshwilliamsforohio.com. They can also reach me on social media platforms.
Now, Josh, what do you want to get done in Congress? Why do you want to come to D.C.? It's kind of a miserable place.
Well, the way I changed my life was, one, I was motivated to overcome the circumstances, but I also was able to take advantage of programs that were available for individuals with disabilities, workforce development programs that helped me retool my lifestyle and gain marketable skills. That's been a passion of mine in the state legislature, championing bills that allow for workforce development training for every Ohioan free of charge right now, not only at our vocational training centers, but because of the budget we just passed, it moved into every single university here in the state of Ohio, where you can get these micro credentials and be able to earn a livable wage. I also want to provide for economic growth here in Toledo. We've been ignored for decades, both from the state and the federal level, and we're finally starting to see investors look at Toledo as an opportunity on the lake and on the Maumee River. I want to make sure I bring hope back to my community that you can overcome tremendous odds without government subsidy. You don't need to be dependent on government programs to survive. Instead, I can show you how to thrive right here in Northwest Ohio.
I'm talking with State Representative Josh Williams, who's going to run for the congressional district currently held by Marcy Kaptur, who's been there since the beginning of time. Josh, when is the primary and how many other Republicans are going to seek the seat?
The primary is going to be in May of 26. So far, there are 4 declared candidates in this race. Many of the candidates I really don't know. I'm concentrating on my race right now. I know that there's tremendous good policies coming out of the White House with President Trump and J.D. Vance And we need to make sure that we have members in Congress that can get that through. We're seeing how tight the votes are. Just to get the one big, beautiful bill passed is a very tight vote in a Republican-controlled House. We need to make sure that we get that vote margin bigger, that we get people aligned with the American First agenda, and we can actually move forward in the small time frame that we're going to have Donald Trump in the White House.
Yeah, I amen to all that, and we do need to get the captor seat because that should have been taken in the last election. It will give us a little bit of hedge against the tidal chart of American politics. In terms of how much money you have to raise, Josh Williams, at Josh Williams for Ohio, what's the budget? What do you need to get in the bank?
We're looking to raise at least $1 million here in the primary. We would love to, of course, raise more, and if we think that we can, we have national and state fundraisers. We put a great team of advisors together. We opened our campaign with 33 endorsements from state representatives that have served with me either now in this General Assembly or in the prior General Assembly. We opened with endorsements from people like Treasurer Sprague, who's going to be our next Secretary of State. Former candidate J.R. Majewski has endorsed our race. Former candidate Mike Gibbons has endorsed our race. We started off with tremendous momentum, and our fundraising is just going underway. We're in beautiful Port Clinton at a fundraiser right now.
All right, so my last question for you, Josh Williams, is you're from a hinky part of the state. There are some Lions fans up there as opposed to Browns fans. You're not one of those, are you?
I'm a born and bred Lions fan. I am.
Oh, no!
I have to admit
no, it always happens
love
with people in Toledo.
Yeah, I love my
always go
Browns
across-
and I love my Bengals, but I grew up watching Barry Sanders go all across the yard line, juking people, and I fell in love with that guy, so he's kept me as a Lions fan.
Well, if we ever have a Lions-Browns Super Bowl, the end times are not far behind that. Josh Williams, come back and check in on us. Good luck in a long race. It's a long 8-month process to get to the 11-month process, actually, to get to the primary, maybe 10, and then another 6 months. Good luck with the energy level. Today, the campaigning never stops. Josh Williams for Ohio.com. Thank you, Josh. I want to remind everyone, I'm in the Relief Factor studio, and this is my Relief Factor, and I'm feeling so much better than I did a week ago at this time after I had cleaned out all the books that had accumulated in the studio over 2 years and lifted them the wrong way and sent the back reeling. So I doubled down on my Relief Factor. I'm feeling good. I may not trundle tomorrow, but I'll be able to at least get a few miles in. And that's good because I've been basically lying down flat with ice and heat, Relief Factor, ice and heat, Relief Factor. And now I'm back. It's fine. A week isn't bad. That happens every few years, and I moan and groan about it. But then I just go back to doing what I do, which is active every day, Relief Factor every day, ice and heat when you make a mistake. You should try Relief Factor. 1-800, the number 4, and the word relief. 1-800, the number 4, and the word relief. Or go to their website, find the starter pack, $19.95. All right, that's all it is, less than $1 a day. But you got to go to their website and find the starter pack. Be a new customer at relieffactor.com, relieffactor.com. Now, David Axelrod was on CNN last night talking with Casey Hunt about Mr. Mamdani's interview with Tim Miller of the Bulwark. I've known Tim for a long time. He's a never Trumper. He's got TDS, but he's a smart guy. And he's talking to Zohran Mamdani, and then David Axelrod comes in over the top. Let's give a listen. Cut number 1.
There is one thing I would like to play also. This, Cuomo worked to make this an issue in the race, but also many Jewish people who live in New York have raised questions about Mamdani. And this is a clip of an interview that he did with Tim Miller over at the Bulwark, where he was pressed about the phrase globalize the intifada, which has become something that has come up in these pro-Palestine protests. I want to play how Mamdani answered that question. Take a look.
The phrase globalized intifada, from the river to the sea, does that make you uncomfortable, or do you think
okay, those are different. Those are super
not
different.
They're not
those are
really
like different genres.
I'm sorry, I'm asking Zohran. Then they're not really different to me, and to some people they're not different.
You know, I know people for whom those things mean very different things, and to me, ultimately, what I hear in so many is a desperate desire for equality and equal rights.
So this is part of why Ashley was underscoring that the alliance between Mamdani and Lander was so important, because it inoculated in some ways some of these criticisms. But David Axelrod globalize the Intifada is viewed as a call to violence
Yes.
against Jewish people, and this is the most, the most Jewish city in the world.
Has that same implication.
Yeah.
Listen, I've said it before. I'm the son of a Jewish refugee. I feel really. I was devastated by what happened on October 7th. I also weep for the children of Gaza. I want to know that he weeps for the people who were brutalized and sexually assaulted and murdered and kidnapped on October 7th, and that there is an understanding that that rights should be pervasive, that respect for human dignity should be pervasive, and so I think he's going to need to communicate that to Jews and non-Jews in this city.
I don't think he's going to communicate that because I don't believe he believes it. But no one was paying attention to Mamdani except my friends at the Commentary podcast. And even when they were being hysterical and funny, I mean, not hysterical crazy, but hysterically funny about this, there's a certain sense of gloom and desperation setting in as they realize this man is a radical, an anti-Zionist, maybe anti-Semitic, and people are concerned. Joined by Danielle Pletka. She is a senior fellow at the American Enterprise Institute, one of the country's leading experts on Iran and the threat that they pose to us. Danny, welcome back. Good to see you. What do you assess the damage done to the Iranian nuclear program as?
So, Hugh, notwithstanding my great expertise, I actually have never been on the ground inside the Iranian nuclear program. However, when I think about 300 plus thousand tons of explosives hitting it, and I understand, and I think it's really important for your listeners to understand how unbelievably delicate the enrichment process through a cascade actually is. The answer is, yeah, absolutely. I agree. It hasn't been destroyed. It hasn't been eliminated, but has it been devastated? For sure.
Now, I listened to General Kane's briefing today. I don't know if you had a chance to do that. I thought he was trying to explain in terms even a Steelers fan can understand. You can't put that much explosive down 3 ventilation and expect anything to be working at the other end, even if the mountain doesn't collapse. I think he was being very professional, but somewhat exasperated. Did you hear that in his voice?
Yeah, no, you're completely right. So again, what people need to understand about enrichment is that you have a centrifuge. A centrifuge is exactly what it sounds like. It's something that spins. So just to give your listeners an example, when the Iranians took offline for either maintenance or in accordance with agreements with the International Atomic Energy Agency, took offline some of their cascade, they destroyed fully a third of their centrifuges, and they were doing a controlled shutdown that was in their hands. Now drop a bomb on that. Now drop 14 massive ordnance penetrators on that. If you understand anything about the science, there's no way that you think that this was just like a bite on the ankle.
I agree, and I'm just going to leave it there and move on to the much more interesting question to me. Danny, you think about what other people think about a lot. And so if you're in the Iranian elite, either in the IRGC or one of the mullahs or one of their state-owned corporations, how do you feel about your life right now? Because their world is shattered. Every illusion they had about their security and strength is in pieces. What does that do to a regime?
It's a great question, Hugh. Everybody can analogize this to those horror movies that there used to be where the phone would ring and the bad guy would be, and he's calling from inside the house. That's what the Israelis did to the Iranian regime. They knew where they were inside the house. And so, look, I think they're nervous. I think they're worried. But I think they got the message. If Iran does the right thing, the regime can be saved. The problem for me is I don't know that they know what the right thing to do is. I have not seen any clear demands from the president or from the Israelis about what it is that the Iranians need to do.
I remember that President Trump said to Marco Rubio, draw up something for them to sign. I'm not sure what they're going to sign, but I do know that if I'm a mullah or I'm on that second tier right below the supreme leader, I'm really worried about the people sitting in the room as to whether or not they're working for Mossad, and I'm really wondering whether I got to get out of the country. Do you think that regime panic is set in?
I think it probably has, and I know you listened to that Israeli recording that the Washington Post got with this Israeli calling and speaking in Farsi to a senior IRGC, Islamic Revolutionary Guard Corps general, where he said, "I don't think you understand. I know where you are. I'm as close to you as the vein on your neck." The problem is, I think that there aren't a lot of options for this regime. What happens next, where they go, and the risk of being killed is very, very serious. So they've got to make really tough calculations. And if they don't think that we are serious or the Israelis are serious, then they may stay along just for regime protection.
Yeah. Now, in terms of what they could do, if you had a suggestion to make to them, Danny, what would it be? What kind of public statement could they make to indicate to the world that they're out of the global terrorism business?
What a great question. What the Iranians should do, and I wrote about this on Sunday, Hugh, because I thought it was a really important thing. The Iranians are smart people. This is a great culture. What they should do is they should announce that they are going to give up enrichment. They should announce that they are going to step back from their regional adventures. They should announce things that reassure both the neighborhood, the Europeans, and the United States that a new dawn is coming. Will they do that? I don't think so. And the main reason that I wrote at the time was this is a profoundly ideological Islamist regime, and I don't think they can do the right thing.
Now, is there any indication that in the lower levels there are colonels of the sort of Hugo Chavez, who came up, he was a colonel when he took over Venezuela 35 years ago. That Gaddafi was a colonel when he took over Libya before his long reign of despotism. Do we have any idea if the IRGC has within it a survival instinct that, maybe we'll go the way of Burma and just run a coup here against the Ayatollahs?
Assad was the same, by the way. He was one of those junior officer corps. All I can say is that our guys from our Critical Threats Project, run by Fred Kagan, don't see that. You don't see fissures inside the IRGC. You see a lot of unhappiness from the population, a lot of economic unhappiness, but we have not seen that there are really significant splits in the IRGC. So if they're there, if those colonels are there, we don't know it.
Now, I listened to Matt Continetti make a point on the Commentary podcast today that Bill Clinton bombed Milosevic in 99, and Milosevic fell a year later after the bombing stopped. It took a while for the aftershocks to bring him down. Any chance of that? I'm just looking for some hope here, Danny.
I know, I'm sorry, and I'm not helping you or making you happy. Look, this is a police state, and it doesn't feel like a police state at all times, but they have very extensive Chinese-bought surveillance systems. They know what people are doing all the time. So will they fall? I didn't expect Assad to fall. I didn't expect the Soviet Union to fall when it did. So I'm not going to ever predict to you that it's going to happen because it's really hard to know. But I would say that this is a much more serious police state than most people in the West recognize.
Yeah, I didn't know that. And I guess the Israelis must have hacked the Chi-Com system because they knew where everyone was at exactly the same time. Danny Pletka from AEI, thank you so much. Her podcast with Mark Thiessen is called What the Hell is Going On? It's always entertaining, always informative. And you can follow Danny on X at dpletka.com. just at Pletka on X. My phone number is 1-800-520-1234. If you have an opinion on the strike on Iran, 1-800-520-1234. I want you to hear again the chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff, General Dan Kane, talking about everything that went into this strike and how long it has been since we have been planning for it. Cut number 3.
Now let me next move to a walkthrough of the GBU-57 massive ordnance penetrator weapon and share a little bit about the planners who did this and their work on the weapon. First, let me set the stage for you. There's an organization in the U.S. called the Defense Threat Reduction Agency, DTRA. DTRA does a lot of things for our nation, but DTRA is the world's leading expert on deeply buried underground targets. In 2009, a Defense Threat Reduction Agency officer was brought into a vault at an undisclosed location and briefed on something going on in Iran. For security purposes, I'm not going to share his name. He was shown some photos and some highly classified intelligence of what looked like a major construction project in the mountains of Iran. He was tasked to study this facility, work with the intelligence community to understand it, and he was soon joined by an additional teammate. For more than 15 years, this officer and his teammate lived and breathed this single target, Fordow, a critical element of Iran's covert nuclear weapons program. He studied the geology. He watched the Iranians dig it out. He watched the construction, the weather, the discard material, the geology, the construction materials, where the materials came from. He looked at the vent shaft, the exhaust shaft, the electrical systems, the environmental control systems, every nook, every crater, every piece of equipment going in and every piece of equipment going out. They literally dreamed about this target at night when they slept. They thought about it driving back and forth to work, and they knew from the very first days what this was for. You do not build a multi-layered underground bunker complex with centrifuges and other equipment in a mountain for any peaceful purpose. They weren't able to discuss this with their family, their wives, their kids, their friends, but they just kept grinding it out. And along the way, they realized we did not have a weapon that could adequately strike and kill this target. So they began a journey to work with industry and other tacticians to develop the GBU-57. They tested it over and over again, tried different options, tried more after that. They accomplished hundreds of test shots and dropped many full-scale weapons against extremely realistic targets for a single purpose: kill this target at the time and place of our nation's choosing. And then, on a day in June of 2025, more than 15 years after they started their life's work, the phone rang and the President of the United States ordered the B-2 force that you've supported to go strike and kill this target. Yesterday, I had the incredible honor and privilege of spending time with these two Defense Threat Reduction Agency officers who've given so much. One of them said, quote, "I can't even get my head around this. My heart is so filled with the pride of being a part of this team. I am so honored to be a part of this." To you both, thank you, and thank you to your families. Operation Midnight Hammer was the culmination of those 15 years of incredible work. The air crews, the tanker crews, the weapons crews that built the weapons, the load crews that loaded it.
I think it's a remarkable press conference. I'm going to play you one more clip from it before Jim Talent comes in to talk about it. But this clip has got a lot of silence in it. I hope you're watching on the Salem News Channel, but I'll try and narrate because he's watching a movie. So let's play the clip of him watching the movie. And he doesn't say much. It's an illustration of what happens when you send all these penetrators down the air vents. And the only thing it looks like to me, it's like the Star Wars, the very first movie that came out in, 1978? Here's General Kane again speaking. He's watching this incredible explosion, the simulation thereof.
You'll see inside the mission space.
you don't want to be there. If you were, you're
Unlike
not there
a normal
anymore.
surface bomb, you won't see an impact crater because they're designed to deeply bury and then function. I know there's been a lot of questions about that. All 6 weapons at each vent at Fordo went exactly where they were intended to go. A bomb has 3 effects that causes damage. Blast.
Pause it right there. The 3 effects are dead, dead, and deader. Jim Talent is the National Leadership Council chair for the Reagan Institute. More important to me, he knows the Iranian problem set, and he's been watching this week closely. Jim, what's your assessment of what the Iranian regime must be thinking right now?
I think they're going to go arrest a lot of people, I think they're going to turn inward to try and sustain the regime. I mean, if you put a gun to my head, I'd say they'll be successful in the short term, but when Khomeini goes, that's when they may have a problem. He's probably
Khamenei.
Strong enough to hang on. Yeah,
Khamenei,
right.
yeah. So,
well, yeah, I'm sorry.
He's 86 years old.
I'm just an old meat and potatoes former Midwestern senator. I mean, I'm sorry, my friend. You're right. Danny Pletka
but you
knows
know,
how to
like I
pronounce
do, everybody in that regime has got to be looking over their shoulders, right? Afraid that the people on their left and their right are working for Mossad.
Yeah, and I think you can't overestimate the impact of the fact that all of their pretensions and all of their ambitions have now been exploded. They're not going to dominate the region. They're not going to impose their version of Sharia law on their neighbors. They're not going to usher in a new wave of radical Shia Islam around the world. It ain't happening. I mean, it went down with those MOPs that hit Fort Al and Natanz. So I think you're going to see a change in the character of it at some point. But it may become a very internally focused, militarily controlled dictatorship that won't be good for the Iranian people, but it will be a lot better for the region than what we've had.
Now, Jim, you know how the proxies work. Do you expect that they will wither on the vine because there's not going to be enough money to do everything Iran needs, and they're not going to? They don't even have a delivery system to Hezbollah and Hamas anymore. I don't think they're welcome in Syria. They might be able to send some stuff over to the Monster Garage guys in Yemen, but are they really going to feel like spending their money there? They've got to be up against the wall.
Yeah, I think it'll be probably a little bit different with regard to each proxy. I mean, Hamas has been destroyed as a military organization. And one of the things going forward that we and the Israelis need to do as we build a new security architecture, a new equilibrium in the Middle East, is find a solution to Gaza that gives the Saudis enough of a fig leaf to be able to go ahead and sign the Abraham Accords and recognize Israel. That's one issue, but Hamas has been destroyed. Obviously, Assad is gone. Trump is already working on Syria to turn it into a conservative Sunni state rather than a radical Sunni state. And my guess is that this outcome here is going to help doing that. Hezbollah is the interesting one. And I think here's you probably do want to go back and ask Danny Pletka, somebody really expert in Hezbollah, because they're still fairly powerful, but they have a government there, Lebanon, to deal with. And they have to square off their relationships with that government so that they can continue to survive as a separate entity. I don't know how that's going to go. As far as the Houthis are concerned, I think we just starve them out over time. I don't know how the Iranians are able to resupply them, and I don't know where they're going to get their money or their weapons without them.
And so the question becomes, when they've got all these needs, I didn't realize, let me back up. I didn't realize until 2 days ago in the Wall Street Journal, the Iranian economy over 10 years has shrunk by 45%. So it's a collapsing economy, and now their security architecture is collapsed. If anything was ever ready for a coup, it's this regime.
Yeah, and they have to decide initially how they're going to respond President Trump is going to continue to demand that they give up this entire nuclear enterprise. And he's going to demand it. He's going to up his demands is what he's going to do, because he's a good negotiator and he's a stronger position than he was in just a couple of weeks ago. And so are they going to sign publicly, sign off to a Libyan type solution? Can they do that? I mean, the humiliation of that would be unbelievable. But if they don't, Trump is going to continue the sanctions just at the time when they need relief. They're obviously in a very difficult position. So, as I said, they're already arresting people. They're going to focus in the short term on trying to stay in power.
Well, an 86-year-old supreme leader is not the ideal person to be running a ship that's just run aground. I don't know that he's able to cope with this.
Right. And as you've seen, and as everybody in the show's discussed, Israel has so thoroughly penetrated that enterprise. And you mentioned, I mean, what must it feel like to be somebody in the Revolutionary Guard, maybe on a second level, looking around at the people, around you? Well, one of the things they're probably thinking is, maybe I need to start helping the Israelis. In other words, this whole outcome is going to make it that much easier for the Israelis to recruit even more supporters. I mean, people they can give some money to and get information from and spirit out of the country. So it's a new day in the Middle East.
The big question I want to ask you, and if I can, I'd like to keep you for the last segment as well so we can work on this. In the last 6 weeks, we've seen Ukraine penetrate into Siberia with drones to destroy strategic bombers. We saw Israel penetrate into Iran to kill every scientist and 15 generals, up to 35 generals now. Those are closed society. How vulnerable are we?
We're very vulnerable, Hugh. We've been vulnerable ever since the information age hit us about 25 years ago. And you're right. I mean, the possibility of remote control of drones, remotely controlled by the longer range, that have precision strike capabilities. That's one vulnerability. We're vulnerable to cyber attacks. In fact, we're being cyber attacked all the time. There's a possibility of bioagents. So, I mean, the vulnerabilities are proliferating, and it's very difficult for us, and we can talk about it if you want, because we are an open society, because all of these critical infrastructure nodes are regulated by different levels of government. I mean, when you get into this, for example, energy infrastructure, which is obviously hugely important. Well, that's partly regulated by the feds, partly by the states, and in many places by localities. So just structurally going about trying to harden them is very difficult from a governance standpoint, but we have to do the best we can. And I also think we have to continue the kind of active risk management that you've seen from the Trump administration. We're not the world's policemen, but we do have to
Jim,
manage
stand by.
risk.
I want to come back and talk to you about New York City, though, because I do need your view on that as well. Two stories today, bomb damage assessment and damage assessment in New York. I moved to Washington, D.C. for the first time in 1981, in the summer of 81. Jim Talent was there. When was your first summer in D.C., Jim?
1993. I got elected in 1992.
Okay, so you're about 10 years behind me. But we got between us about 90 years of watching D.C. and watching American politics. I have never seen a more radical candidate in a high-profile race than Mr. Mamdani. Have you?
Well, maybe the mayor in Chicago, but other than that, no. I mean, I think nobody is as open about it, I guess. I mean, Karen Bass is pretty bad in L.A. as well. I mean, are you noticing a pattern, that
big city mayors in blue city. But this guy is out. He wants government-owned supermarkets. How do you think that's going to work?
Well, it's not going to work, I mean, it shows, and the fact that anybody was attracted to that just shows they don't understand anything about government or grocery stores. So, look, I mean, I'm laughing about it, but this is going to be very bad for the Jewish community in New York, and that's the thing that scares me the most. It's ironic, the one domain in which Israel has lost the conflict in the last 18 months is the information domain. I mean, their narrative, although certainly based on truth and justice, has not triumphed, and it has excited anti-Semitism in many places around the world, including, unfortunately, the United States. And what we need are leaders who will absolutely set their face against it and step on it. And we have the opposite now in New York.
We have the actual type of it in Donald Trump. He doesn't go anywhere without denouncing it, and I think it's useful for non-Jews to be Zionists. I know you are, I am, so is Donald Trump. I just think that the major American media fell. I fell down on the job. I didn't pay any attention to this. Who elects a socialist verging on a communist? I mean, it just doesn't happen.
Well, I think his victory is understandable. I mean, first of all, look who he was running against. Cuomo is not liked in New York for a whole host of reasons. Adams is not liked, and I think he just was inept in a lot of the ways he handled himself in that job. Mamdani is young. It's a tendency on the part of Democratic voters, particularly young Democratic voters, to look for the next Messiah, if you will. I mean, they invested Barack Obama with that kind of an image or a message. He's a good grassroots campaigner, and he caught a wave. He was at the right place in the right time. Now, I think we should allow for the possibility that when he gets into office, assuming he wins in the general election, that he may actually try and grapple with some of the city's problems and become more practical.
But it's not South Bend. It's not South Bend. It's so much.
I hear you.
So much can go wrong in that city. Jim Talent, thank you for spending some extra time with me. Follow Jim on X at Jim Talent. He was also Dwayne's guest on Dwayne's World earlier this week with a BDA.